Prior to starting, viewer discretion is strongly suggested that the following be used, for both amusement and educational purposes. This is the exact federal text. Sean Diddy's testimony in court inner city reported on Combs's trial. No one anticipated that Will Smith would seem to have tense, focused eyes on the table of the prosecution till the rear doors opened, and Will entered. Even the judge froze as Smith's gasps resounded. No pre-written message or announcement, Will alone taking the initiative. He had been silent up to that point, as the name Diddy whirled through court leaks, whispers, and headlines audio. Recordings that are allegedly all sound settling to release, but something had altered. Perhaps the Mountain evidence. Perhaps it was the treachery from individuals he formerly trusted. Perhaps it was listening to those recordings played behind doors. Will completed whatever it was. He wasn't on the stand and remained mute. He was present as a witness and a celebrity, who said too after seeing too much little, and when he started talking, the courtroom was not equipped to handle what they would listen as a result of what Will disclosed regarding Diddy, the parties involved, and the deception, and the methodical oversight wasn't only explosion. It began as a warning, similar to every other Diddy trial day. There were quiet conversations going on in the room. The journalists crouched in their assigned disputes, and attorneys muttered plans as they awaited the next planned observer. However, as soon as the eyeside doors opened, allowing Will Smith to enter the courtroom by itself, without any entourage or legal team, there was no announcement that the room had changed. Some folks might be heard dropping a pin, believed it was an error, while others, although it was a prank, Will's gait. His expression was controlled and purposeful, seriousness and resolutely informed. Every one of this was authentic. The judge's eyebrow went up, and Diddy, who had been consulting his attorney. The defense table team abruptly froze, mid-sentence, his face turned pale. Clearly, Will walked directly to the observer avoided making eye contact with anyone. He didn't look at Diddy at all, and I wasn't. Will started today after being subpoenaed, asked to speak, and the judge granted it, and the entire trial from that point on changed, because Will was going to claim wasn't included in any media story. It wasn't a leak on social media. He had been plagued by it for years. Anything that started at a privateer gathering of Hollywood's elite in private. I've been silent for too much time, he continued. I've produced films. Regarding courage, I have discussed. I've accepted accolades for parts because of my ethics. I played heroes in that scene. But none of that counts if I am unable to be truthful about what I saw, what I went through. And he turned to see who had planned everything. You made a little move in Diddy's direction. The courthouse where it began, similar to many Hollywood ties with an invitation. It was brought about via a mutual buddy, respected in the field for the manner in which they framed it as it should have been Diddy's exclusive annual private collecting. Nothing out of the ordinary. Just business elite networking is a location where genuine power brokers were allowed to express themselves. Had received similar invitations, so I didn't doubt it. But as soon as when he came, he noticed a change. It took place at a remote hillside estate. The curved driveway was lined with black SUVs. There were security guards stationed everywhere. Not only at doors, as soon as I entered, my phone was seized, which ought to have been They claimed that was the first red flag for privacy to ensure the comfort of everybody and safety. But it seemed as though something otherwise, as if they had no desires. Recorded. If this tale is instructive to you and wish to remain informed about the most recent changes in this case, kindly take a moment to subscribe and like this video to our channel. Will explained his state of guided through the estate. The music was playing and the lights was dim throughout, hypnotic and low, with no discernible cameras, but there were mirrored placed at odd angles. It felt like though everything was being noted. Will stated that after a while, mixing and having a few drinks, Diddy went straight up to him and said such as, "Now you'll see why our circle is really strong." He grinned. That smile wasn't amiable. Rather, it was Will claimed to have followed Diddy, pondering as they went into a lower level of the house. They were scheduled to meet with industry. Instead, he was shaken by what he witnessed. Fundamentally, there were individuals in some obviously. Compromised positions drunk to the point of assent, some of which I recognized right away. From well-known movies and songs, some looked uneasy as if they weren't there. Others were there purely by choice. Viewing a recording on a small gadgets, and did he act as its director? Similar to a producer pausing on a set, breathing deeply, although I wasn't sure how to respond, and that was the original goal. When you see something similar, just by remaining silent, you become complicit. Will's voice remained steady, although approximately a week following the celebration, he got a parcel at my private residence, home with a private address. It contained a USB stick with a message saying, just a simple, welcome to the family. Will stated in court that the anxiety he experienced was different when he looked at the contents. Everything he had seen was video. Some of it showed me that night. Just being present, which was harmful, sufficient considering what was taking place. But additionally, there were times when I showed up confused to the point where I couldn't remember clearly what I had or what had occurred, said that it was altered to give the impression that I actively participated instead of, he told us, startled onlooker. That's when he recognized the objective of these events. They weren't parties. Every occurrence was a blackmail factory. Produced usable leverage against the wishes of everyone present, explained how Diddy called them. Days later, he inquired as to whether I had gotten his welcome present and then right away turned to talk about a possible cooperation. The message was unambiguous. Shared secrets that now connected us, and I was anticipated to comply with, testified regarding a specific dialogue that troubled him. Diddy stated in passing how a bright young recently, the actor had gotten challenging to collaborate with following one of his incidents. He remarked, "It's unfortunate when talent doesn't comprehend how the company truly does the trick." 2 months later that the actor's career had come to a total standstill. New positions, no callbacks, nothing, finally quit the field completely. He surveyed the courtroom this way, wasn't limited to gatherings with. This was improper behavior, methodical. This was calculated. Individuals who, after being compromised, cooperated, discovered doors opening for those who refused to, discovered their professions, destroyed Will, stopped looking at him. For years with the judges, I assured myself I was only defending my family and career, my reputation, but in reality, my silence shielded a damaging system. Individuals, and that insight is what got me here today at last. Outlined how, following that initial incident, he was invited to Diddy's party, routinely convenes. I turned them all down, but after every refusal would result in a project. The person I was attached to will abruptly lose. Supplying a director with whom I was to work would receive superior offer scripts that I was assured would go to. He also provided testimony regarding the pattern he initially noticed. It appeared like misfortune, just the typical ups and industry downturns, but the time was excessively regular and I wasn't alone. The experience will be explained. Discussions with other performers and musicians with comparable tales, we'd converse in code and inquire as to whether we've been to the home or if we had been given a present. It was widely acknowledged that couldn't be discussed openly, as we were all afraid of the same thing, that everything was being captured on camera. We could be harmed by anything. Described a 2017 incident in which he was thinking of speaking out, so I said to someone I believed I could rely on that my intention was to go public with. 3 days later, I discovered a weblog published a tale that was entirely made up. Regarding my private life, the specifics were designed to be sufficiently believable that to refuse them would only result in more focus. The message was unambiguous. Merely an example of what would occur if stated, and will attest that Diddy's network went well beyond entertainment. He was connected to certain media organizations, with leaders at large corporations, with individuals who regulated advertising expenditures, and their reach wasn't limited to the music business. Or Hollywood was a community of impact that might affect practically any. He explained a facet of public life that if you were in favor, the system functioned. Legal issues vanished. Resolved enigmatic bad reports, never observed publication. However, if you were excluded all of a sudden, there were rumors. Anonymous sources disseminating harmful details that could affect your reputation, broken down so slowly that by the time you became aware of what was going on, it was too late. He will claim to have seen others make an effort to escape this system. witnessed gifted individuals attempt to stand up. To keep a distance, nearly without exception, they were methodically demolished, not only professionally, but relationships ended on a personal level. Disbanded support networks and friendships, the solitude was intentionally broken. Will's face grew more serious as I remained quiet for years. I persuaded I was defending my family for myself, everything I had created for my job, but then the evidence of indictments began to surface, started to show, and I understood that my silence was not a kind of protection. He detailed his cooperation. In observing the news as the initial charges against when Diddy went public, I told myself I didn't have a tale to share with people who should be the ones who had bad experiences. To talk. But I later observed how those who did came forward and were treated in the manner that they were being challenged and questioned. The manner in which their characters were acting. Media accounts of assassinations will be recalled. When everything, for him, changed. It was with my family at home when a news and notice regarding a witness in this instance, who abruptly retracted their account of someone who had been courageous enough to reveal who had provided thorough reports that precisely matched what I had observed abruptly was claiming that I know it never happened. What that means for the system right away remained operational. The device was still. He told the court he was silencing people. I was unable to sleep that night, so I kept reflecting on everyone who had been harmed. Every career was ruined. I kept returning despite the lives being damaged. I wondered if someone, with my platform, with my level and resources of public assistance, was too scared to talk. Did anyone else have any hope? Will claimed to have spoken with the prosecution team immediately the following morning. I told them everything I knew and had observed everything I had gone through, transferred the USB drive to communications. I had notes that I had saved that could support what other people had. He had already testified and glanced at the jurors. I'm not here to say that I'm a victim, recognizing here that my silence made me contributing to the issue. I might have talked years ago. Perhaps I should have if I would have had fewer people if hurt. Then he turned back to Diddy. Spending time with resolution, and you relied on the quiet. You assumed that dread would be more powerful than conscience will momentarily close his eyes before, proceeding as though to collect preparation for the subsequent events when the prosecution questioned what ultimately persuaded in order to testify. I informed them of the not the ones I knew. He claimed of the tapes. Regarding the ones I didn't, explained that Diddy's former assistant had speak with him in secret. This individual had been carrying for years. They had been a burden. In charge of overseeing the digital compromising material library, they informed me that there were numerous recordings arranged by individual by potential utility, according on the degree of damaging information that the prosecutor presented with a sealed piece of evidence. We would want to enter your honor envelope. This paper, as the judge's Exhibit 53 nodded, and it was taken to the bench, Will attested that it was a duplicate of. He had seen the names in the file index. Included in that list are some of the most influential figures in the entertainment industry. In the next section, we'll describe business. In politics, there were useful keywords for each name. Specific: present financial assistance to an inebriated minor compromise. It served as a list of destruction. Will explain how he had seen this information via his aide. They failed to provide me with the real records that were protected by federal investigators. However, they demonstrated to me the catalog, the scheme of organization. They displayed my name in that database, featuring several entries and dates. The prosecutor produced one additional document. Given this chain of emails, could you describe its importance to the court? Will be acknowledged. Those are the letters that Diddy and several business leaders talking about how to deal with a specific actress who had started discussing her in private encounter at one of these gatherings. They first describe a multi-step procedure, slandering her with unimportant rumors that would make her less trustworthy, then utilizing financial strains by initiatives to which she was affiliated, and ultimately, if required, releasing specific sections, video that would make her feel ashamed as they defended themselves. He stared 3 weeks following these toward Diddy mails that the actress renounced publicly. Remarks she had given to close pals stated that she had been having mental health problems that impacted her recollection and declared that she was going to take a vacation. from the sector in which she has not worked. Given that Will recounted the time, he understood the operation's entire extent. Individual careers weren't the only ones being. It was a whole power. Structure based on fear and compromise, the parties, the recordings, and the strategic information use. Everything was planned in order to establish an inviolable position. The A document was presented by the prosecutor on the "Can you see the courtroom screens, Mr. Smith? Recognize this SMS message exchange. Will examine the screen." Diddy and I were together in 2018, had refused a request to attend one of his circumstances for the third time. His reaction said, "You're making things more difficult than they must keep in mind that I still have our. It would be unfortunate during the first meeting if your children witnessed that aspect of their father." Will's tone didn't waver, but his first direct result was stiff hands. Danger until that point, everything had been suggested structure, but that message he made it clear that he would employ the content he possessed if I didn't cooperate. He recalled how he answered the danger. That I failed to respond to the communication, rather. I started recording everything, installed home security systems. That was not remotely accessible, established distinct avenues of communication. For my family, I began getting ready for what it seemed likely to me that something would eventually be made available to harm me since I refused to comply. When asked what made him believe that Will, it was worth the risk to testify now, outlined a discussion with another witness in the matter that they informed me of proof that had been obtained by information from federal investigators that unable to be destroyed or used as leverage. They added, "If enough of us speak, the system abruptly malfunctions." At that point, I knew he needed to glance at the jury. "I'm not here because I'm brave," he said. "I am here because others showed courage before me. I'm here because eventually the price of solitude outweighed the price of communication. And if someone with my platform and resources felt constrained by imagine this method for years, worked against people who had less, safeguarding his last remarks." The judge permitted Will to speak to Diddy. He got up straight out of the witness chair. He erects his shoulders and looks, glaring at him. "You created an empire out of intimidation," he started. You referred to it as loyalty in your firm, referred to it as family. But what you created was a prison for everybody in your vicinity." Diddy stayed still. His attorney murmured in his ear urgently, but his eyes never departed Will's, initially ethereal. I could see that he was truly terrified. "The things you did to those individuals that you witnessed what you did to others who attended parties. Unwilling to cooperate, even though I heard what you stated when you believed your role to be safe, you didn't make success happen. You created fear." After which Will pulled away. It was a tiny item off his clothing. "I received this flash drive from you years ago. I was covered by your insurance policy, returning it due of its lack of power. The truth has already been revealed. Ask the jurors if you believe this to be simply regarding improper conduct, that you're missing out on private gatherings. Broader context. This concerns a system intended to put people at risk in order to guarantee keeping quiet to restrain their behavior. It didn't only harm people. It influenced what we heard and what we saw. To those who achieved accomplishment and who vanished afterward, he faced Diddy one last time. As they used to say, bad boy for life. However, this is where it concludes and will be brought back to the gathering. His notes on the witness stand and left the courtroom without saying anything. Taking stock, did he do it for the first time? Since the start of the trial, his composed. His hands completely collapsed his facade, shuddered while writing notes to his attorneys. His gaze swept the room, as though looking for a way out since he wasn't for the first time in decades. Directing. The story when Will Smith did not leave the witness stand, appear victorious. He resembled someone who had at last laid down a massive. Meanwhile, the courtroom was quiet, weighing the significance of what they'd heard, and the judge even showed up. I was momentarily speechless. Several jurors dabbed at their tears. Eyes, as well. As music tycoon Diddy, who had shown a resolute sense of confidence during the current sessions, sat stooped and reduced. Will didn't end with the outside. The reporters gathered, but he didn't issue. He walked while making statements or posing for photographers. Directly to his waiting car, his security personnel erecting a wall around. He had a serious countenance, but resolved when a reporter subsequently inquired whether he was afraid of reprisals for his testimony. Will is said to have replied, The truth need not simply be afraid of being exposed. Lies do." Away from the courtroom, the entertainment sector went through what a seismic shift studio was referred to by insiders. Executives convened urgent meetings, publicists behind closed doors fielded frantic phone calls from customers concerned about their personal connections to Diddy performers who has previously worked together with. He made well-crafted statements, removing themselves from any information of unsuitable conduct during the crisis behind the scenes. Legal teams and management put in extra hours. Departments looked into contracts, and associations and public relations companies developed reaction plans for the unavoidable inquiries, but the most social media provided a telling response, where the general people made connections between been evident yet disregarded for years. Interview archives were rediscovered, displaying awkward interactions, where Will seems to have tightened its references to Diddy's red carpet videos, where their exchanges appeared performatively friendly but emphasized tense music industry gatherings where, notably, their orbits never intersected even though they were both there. Media analysts started looking at previous coverage from a fresh perspective. How certain there seemed to be unfavorable reports concerning celebs to appear just as they had separated from Diddy's social group. How bright careers abruptly came to a standstill without elaborating on how specific stories were emphasized, but others were concealed during this inquiry. Has been beneficial to you? Kindly provide support by enjoying this film and supporting our work. Joining our channel to receive more updates coverage of this emerging topic. The most direct influence comes from within the actual legal system. Within 48 hours, Will's testimony was used by the prosecution, declared that several well-known witnesses came forward, people who had previously refused to testify out of concern for the consequences. The wall of quiet was deteriorating, financial consequences increased, quickly growing businesses connected to Diddy's numerous entrepreneurial endeavors witnessed their stock values change as the number of investors increases. Anxious companies that had continued to receive support statements regarding putting relationships on hold while they wait platforms for streaming music and information silently took off his heavily featured, what turned Will's testimony into a playlist, especially. Harmful wasn't only his fame status, it was the systematic character of his story, and the evidence proof he offered. As one legal commenter pointed out, that this was not sentimental. This was a thorough description of hearsay, of an advanced control system supported by records and in line with the trends outlined by additional witnesses, possibly the majority. Notably, Will's testimony appeared to encourage others. Professionals in the industry at different levels started talking about their own encounters with people other than Diddy particularly, but with a mindset of complicity and silence that had influenced entertainment for many years. What had started as a lawsuit against a strong figure was growing into a more expansive, taking mental health specialists into consideration, in an increase in requests for assistance, entertainment industry hotlines, employees. A communal trauma is what we are witnessing. One therapist who specializes in response, the field clarified, people who normalized extremely distressing situations are already identifying them for what they were. Will, who stayed mostly out of sight in the days that followed. His own sources of testimony showed that his family was his top priority, and psychological health. This wasn't done to gain attention, or one acquaintance advised a reporter, pay attention. The reason it was done was required legal professionals started making assumptions regarding the implications of Mo4 the case testimony. From a Will Smith's prominence with his degree of credibility and public confidence, it is challenging to fire a former prosecutor. Remarks. The defense will try to describe it as rumors or overstatement. Nevertheless, the specificity of the account and how well it aligns with there is proof that difficult. When the court met again, the next day, the judge spoke about the immediate effect of Will's testimony on this. The court acknowledges the importance of I would want to remind you of yesterday's proceedings. Everyone who uses our legal system operates based on facts and evidence rather than celebrity or feeling that each witness who moves ahead in spite of the danger to oneself merits our consideration and attention. The prosecutor expanded on Will's evidence, linking it to prior proof and observers. What Mr. Smith said wasn't alone. It was a component of a system, a way of doing things that, now several witnesses have confirmed, when viewed from several perspectives, the consistency is not Diddy's defense team by chance, seemed to have strained their approach. Had made extensive use of characterizing accusers as people or opportunists with individual vendettas that came close failed too. Someone having resources and their cross-examination's reputation, efforts felt desperate, concentrating on small discrepancies, while steering clear of the content of the testimony, the last picture from that. The trial's phase wasn't of legal debates or procedural specifics. It was between two opposing expressions, Will Smith and the unburdened departing. The expression of a person who has finally spoken, Diddy observing him go with his truth. The terrified knowledge that the meticulously built world was falling apart as a single cultural entity around him. In an analysis, a commentator stated, became widely known, Will Smith didn't merely testify against the subject of his testimony, opposing a system that transformed authority into consent, to turn quiet into cooperation and Iger's panic into control. By doing this, possibly contributed to the dismantling of something far greater than the empire of one guy.